I was born in the year 1807 on the 19th of January at a place called Stratford Hall Plantation, Stratford, Virginia. My father, his nickname was Light Horse Harry Lee. His real name was Henry. He was twice governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was a Revolutionary War hero at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse down in Guilford County, North Carolina. My father, with his cavalry dragoons, helped General Nathaniel Greene escape from being captured by General Cornwallis at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. So my father was a Revolutionary War hero. Like I said, twice governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. A man that owned land. He owned several parcels of land all over the state of Virginia. But however, when I was 8 years old, my father lost the family fortune because he had invested in some bad investments and had lost everything. He had to go into debtor's prison, where he was taken down to the West Indies to work off his debt. He never returned and actually stepped foot back into the States. He died on an island off the coast of Florida and Georgia. Northern Florida and southern Georgia, the little island right off the coast there is where he died at. He was visiting General Greene and his daughter, who they owned that island, and that's where he died at. So he never made it back to Virginia. He was buried on that island, in fact. So the last time I saw my father, I was 8 years old. I was raised by my mother, by my mother's brother, my uncle, in Alexandria, Virginia. I went to West Point Military Academy, where at West Point I am the only cadet so far in the history of West Point that never got a single demerit. I never walked a second of penalty time in the yard. I was a straight A student, but however, I graduated second in my graduation class because on my final exam, another fellow student scored 1 point higher than I did on our final exam, and he got valedictorian, and I graduated number 2. That man's name was Morrison, and Mr. Morrison took his engineering degree, went home to Pennsylvania to his father's railroad company to be the chief engineer of his father's railroad company. Never served a day in the military. When I graduated from West Point, I went straight into the military, which was my desire. I got posted out west. I fought during the Mexican War, where I was part of General Scott's staff during the Mexican War. I was actually wounded during that war, fighting for Mexico City, but not very badly. Then later on, when I resigned my commission with the Union Army and offered my services to Virginia, because Virginia had seceded from the Union in '61, I became a general in command of Virginia militia, sent into Western Virginia for a short period of time to try and make sure that Western Virginia stayed true to Virginia, but I failed to do that. Returned back to Richmond. When I came back to Richmond, I was sent to Charleston, South Carolina, being a certified engineer. I was put in charge of rebuilding forts on the coastline from northern Florida up through North Carolina to Virginia. That was my job for a few months. Joe Johnson got wounded in a battle, could not proceed any further as commander of the Virginia Army. I was recalled back to Richmond, and I was offered a job as the commander of the Virginian Army, where I redesignated it as the Army of Northern Virginia, and I made 2 corps. When I developed 2 corps in that army, I chose none other than Lieutenant General James Longstreet as my 1st Corps commander, and Lieutenant General Stonewall Jackson as my 2nd Corps commander. And that's where we started at. However, here today, ladies and gentlemen, I have with me two fine, well, no, I'll say three fine generals. I apologize, Mr. Governor.
Thank you, sir.
Elect. With me today, I have my 1st Corps Commander, General Longstreet, and I have my 3rd Corps Commander, A.P. Hill, with me today. And we also have the newly elected Governor of the great, wonderful Commonwealth of Virginia, Extra Billy Smith, who does hold the rank of General.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lieutenant General James Longstreet. I am Commander of the 1st Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia. And to kind of fill you in a little bit about my history, where I came from, my father was a farmer, just a simple farmer in northern Georgia. I was born in the year 1821 in the Edgefield district of South Carolina. Grew up in northern Georgia in the Augusta area on my father's farm. I wanted to be a career soldier all my life. I didn't want to be a farmer. I always wanted to be in the military. My dad died when I was around 9 years old or so. My mother chose to move to Alabama with friends and family, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I went to live with my uncle, whose name was Augustus. We called him Gus, and Uncle Gus was an attorney. He had a lot of connections, knew a lot of people, had a lot of friends. Probably a few enemies along the way too. Most lawyers do have a few. But Uncle Gus saw to it that I got the necessary education so that when the time came, just maybe I could get that appointment to West Point Military Academy. And at the tender age of 17 years, I was appointed to West Point. While I was there, I met a young man, y'all may have heard of him. He and I became very close friends. We called him Sam, but his name was Ulysses. Ulysses S. Grant. He and I were very close. And my whole 4 years at West Point, he and I were the best of friends. I graduated in 1842, went into the military as a young second lieutenant, stationed at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. The next year, my friend Sam Grant graduated, and he too came into the military, and we continued our friendship. It got so bad that on the Senate floor they would have fist fights between northern politicians and southern politicians because they couldn't agree on nothing. So around 1860, December of 1860, South Carolina left the Union, formed the Confederate States of America, and shortly thereafter, 6 other states followed suit. They elected their own president, printed their own money, designed their own flag, wrote their own constitution, elected their own officials. They put everything in place that the colonies put in place some 80 years prior when they chose to leave the clutches of England. And I've been in the Union Army 19 years. I've reached my goal in life. I've obtained the rank of major. Am I going to support the Union or resign my commission and support my state? Well, I chose to leave after 19 years of service in the Federal Army and offer my sword and my services to my state because I felt, like many others, that the states should rule the people and not a federal government.
General Ambrose P. Hill, Lieutenant General, Army of Northern Virginia, 3rd Corps Commander. And glad of it. I was born about 10 miles west of Culpeper, Virginia. Was a sickly child. Had a fairly large family to born into. My father was what you'd call a good, solid citizen. He was probably a little on the upper middle class side, comfortably well off. A nice small plantation outside Culpeper, and a nice home in Culpeper. My mother was a small-framed and rather fragile lady. She spent an awful lot of time looking out the window. She was very sickly, and there was a lot of talk or whispering in the back halls that quite possibly most of this sickness was between her ears more than anywhere else. So this is this is what I came up in. Now I was a sickly child too. I was sickly all of my life, still all the way from a very young age all the way up until my death. If a disease came through, I got it. One attribute that I had was that I did get what was considered at that time a very good education at home. I went to some private schools, some of the better schools in the area, and I always loved to study military history. I did not come from a military family with long, deep-rooted military traditions, but I did become in love with the military lifestyle and chose early to direct myself in that direction. At the age of 16, I got an appointment to West Point. And when I went to West Point, I was 16 years and 3 months old. I too had an interesting friend that I met in West Point. He and I were in the same room together, lived together for the first 2 years. My friend was a fellow by the name, and you probably know his name too. His name was George McClellan. And we were very close, very tight friends. In the third year of the first 2 years we weren't allowed to go home. So here I was, a 16-year-old kid, uprooted from home and sent to West Point. And by the way, my parents, when I got that appointment, which was a real honor for our family to send somebody to West Point, decided they wanted to give me a gift to take with me. Now, I'm not and never have been accused of being a deeply religious person. My mother was a deeply religious person. My dad decided he was going to give me a Bible, and he did, and I cherished that Bible. My mother gave me a handball. Now, I know you're wondering about what in the world am I so happy about a handball, but in our community, in our area, that was the best thing that a mother could give her son. It was a good luck charm. I still have it. I carried it till the day I died.
I am William Smith. Most folks call me Extra Billy. I'm currently Major General and Governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I shall be taking office January 1st. As General Lee pointed out, I am not a West Point follower, which means that you, the taxpayers, do not have to pay for my education, like you did for these gentlemen. I am also the senior member of this group, chronologically speaking. I was born in 1797 in King George County, Virginia, just maybe 15, 20 miles away from where some years later General Lee would be born. In 1818, I went to Culpeper and I established a law practice there. I built my house on Main Street, and it was about 2 blocks from the home that the Hill family was living in. As General Hill mentioned, he had been born about 10 miles from Culpeper, but they moved into town, and I was just down the road from him a little bit. My law practice flourished, but then I branched out and I opened a stagecoach line that would eventually run from Washington City to the Georgia State Capitol. You all know where the Georgia State Capitol is, do you not? Villageville. Villageville, man. Atlanta. Never heard of it. Sounds like someplace in the middle of a cornfield. Villageville. So I prospered there, and then I did get involved with politics. I helped elect General Jackson as president, not Jonathan Jackson, but Andrew Jackson, the original General Jackson, if I may say so, as president. But then in 1836, I myself was elected to the Virginia State Senate. I was re-elected in 1840, but then in 41 I resigned to run for the United States House of Representatives. I was defeated by 6 votes. However, my opponent, Mr. Banks, had gone in, he had taken a seat, but there were irregularities in the elections, something of course we would not have nowadays. But the election, I petitioned the House, the election was referred to the Committee on Elections, and as a result, some 6 months later, the election was rerun. And I was indeed elected. Mr. Banks is out and I am in. But of course, House of Representatives, 2 years later, I'm up for re-election. My political opponents, the Whigs, I hope none of you are members of the Whig Party here, were desperate because I had become quite popular in my district, and they saw no way of defeating me. But what they did, they took my county of Culpeper, moved it out of that district, and put it in the neighboring district that had had a 1,200 Whig majority the previous election. I ran, I did lose by several hundred votes. I moved to Warrenton, Virginia, where I was practicing law, and part of the reason I moved was because my financial situation was not at all good. To be quite honest, I was being foreclosed on. But that's not the story I tell, but I'll be honest with you all. Y'all look like people that would not spread such rumors around. Well, I was doing well. I got my finances back in order until December of 1845, disaster struck. I was elected governor. At that time, the governor was elected by the legislature, and without my knowledge, my name had been put forward, and all of a sudden I'm riding home one day and people are saying, "Hello, Governor Smith." What has happened? Well, I served 3 terms as governor, and in fact I was governor during the war with Mexico, which has been mentioned here. At the end of my term, the end of 1848, my financial situation was again precarious, but there was no problem. I went to California. The gold is just sitting there, you just reach down and you pick it up off the ground. I actually spent about 3.5 years in California. I came back there end of 52, and in 53 I was elected to the House of Representatives again. I would serve 4 more terms, serving there until March of 1861, and yes, General Longstreet, there were some spirited debates took place there. At the beginning of the war, I was commissioned colonel of the 49th Regiment of Virginia Volunteer Infantry. And General Hill has spoke about his attire. I am a civilian, so I wear a civilian hat. And this is what I carry. You never had one of these, huh?
It didn't shed many balls, sir. I didn't have it.
This is very, very easy for people to see on the battlefield. And of course, as a general, I did not go out, or as a colonel, I did not actually fight the other enemy. And these West Point fellows oftentimes make fun of my umbrella. I would say that since we don't engage in hand-to-hand combat as a directional signal, it is just as effective. But can you imagine General Hill with his saber trying to stay dry in the rain? I have the advantage on you, sir, there, I believe.
How did you get the name Extra Billy?
The mail is being delivered much speedier, and I was entitled to additional compensation. In 1834, Congress was investigating the post office department. They were looking at the books, and they noticed that there were a lot of listings for additional compensation to the credit of William Smith. Well, one day, Senator Benjamin Lee of Virginia, that is Lee spelled L-E-I-G-H, no relation to himself, you understand, in speaking on the subject, made reference to what he called the extra payments for Billy Smith. Extra payments, Billy Smith. That has a ring to it, and in fact, dropped the payments part, Extra Billy Smith. And it became so widely known that you did not have to say Smith. If you just said Extra Billy, everyone knows who you're talking about. As you know, there is a gubernatorial election coming up, and people have expressed dissatisfaction with both candidates. Might I suggest you consider a write-in vote for Extra Billy Smith? Because most people have said they prefer a dead politician to any of the live ones now. So Extra Billy Smith for a write-in vote.
Here you go, folks.